Anthem Blue Cross and Common Threads are helping schools across the country learn about healthier food preparation. And here in LA, they're joined by the Sparks and will provide education, recipes, and knowledge to students and families about healthier options. Learn more at anthem.com/ca/sparks. Anthem Blue Cross is the trade name of Blue Cross of California.
Get great deals throughout the store at Safeway. This week at Safeway, get mega packs of bone-in USDA choice beef, New York strip steaks for $5.97 per pound with digital coupon. Limit 2 packages. Plus, Haas avocados are 10 for $10. Member price. Also, this week at Safeway, mix or match 12 packs of 12-ounce cans or 8 packs of 12-ounce bottles of Coca-Cola, Pepsi, 7-Up, or Dr. Pepper are buy 2, get 3 free. Limit 3 free items. Member price plus CRV. Visit Safeway.com or head in store for more deals.
In August of 2016, prolonged rainfall from an unpredictable storm resulted in catastrophic flooding in the state of Louisiana. In my city of Denham Springs, 90% of the homes received water, some 4,200 homes. Of those, 3,000 of these homes received 18 inches or more of water, 25 to 30 inches of rain in less than 72 hours. The Amite River, which cuts through the heart of Livingston Parish, crested at 46.2 feet, some 5 feet above its previously recorded record and some 17.2 feet above its flood stage at Denham Springs. This is my story, as it was experienced through my own eyes, the day I saw the river rise. Thank you for joining us for episode 2 of The Day I Watched the River Rise. I'm Jim Chapman, and we're going to jump right into it. The last time I left you, it was August 12th. We had just went to bed. We were experiencing flooding in several parts of the area, especially up north in Hammond, Louisiana. The Tangi River was really giving that area some problems, and many of us weren't aware of it, to be honest. At least I wasn't, and I know a lot of other people here were not. I think we were all just in a state of disbelief that anything like that could happen, understandably. And so we went to bed, still raining. So we wake up Saturday, August 13th. And it was pretty early in the morning. My wife was already talking about putting things up and putting them up high, and again, I was in disbelief, and I'm like, man, it is not going to flood here. We don't live right off the Amite River. You know, we're a little bit off of it, and we're not far where I live from the Amite River, but far enough that it's never flooded before, ever, in my particular subdivision, which was built in the late 70s. So I worked at that time for a regional paint manufacturer, and we have 3 stores here locally, one in Denham Springs, 2 in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And I felt I needed to go by there and just kind of, talk to the staff there and make sure that we're making preparations in the event that something may happen that we didn't really foresee. So I got up early. On the way into work, I kind of noticed there was a problem. One thing I noticed was the ditches were full. And I had never really seen them like that other than like quick flash flood type things where they fill up and they kind of spill out over the street a little bit and then they go back. But these were full and they were holding full and they were starting to kind of cover the streets, and it was early. So there was a little bit of concern there. I go into work and the guys get there, and a couple of them have mentioned that as they had drove into work, they had noticed water was high, like everywhere. And I kind of went a back way to get to the store. And so I didn't really, other than those ditches being full, I didn't really notice a whole lot that would give me caution. But that being said, I told them, I said, before you leave today, you may want to pick up computers, stuff like that, put them on the counters, and anything that we feel like we can save. At that point, I jumped back in the vehicle, and I was going to head back home. This was probably 8:30. So I get back in the vehicle, and at the time I was driving an F-150, and if you can picture this, there's a neighborhood right behind our store location in Denham Springs, and it's an older neighborhood, and it's kind of a cut through to I guess you could say a primary traveling point in Denham Springs, which is called Range Avenue. So I jump in my truck, and this cut through saves probably 5 minutes for me. So I it's a typical thing that I cut through this back neighborhood. So I jump in my truck and I go drive through this neighborhood, and I notice right off the bat that the water is high. It's about halfway up my tires in my F-150 on the street. So I guess you could say that's about 6 inches of water. And I saw a couple of houses that were starting to flood. And I'm like, oh my God. So I turn around, I go back to the store. And on the way, I called our district manager for Farrell County Paint Company, and I said, look, it's about to flood over here. These guys need to go home. And of course, he agreed 100%. And so I went back to the store and I said, pick everything up you can and close the store. This is bad. This is going to be bad. Y'all need to get home. You need to pick everything up at your house, all that sort of thing. About this same time, I get a call from my wife, and she's even more panicked. And she said, you need to get home. Of course, she had been watching the weather, and at this time, it was well known that there was going to be a vast majority of Denham Springs, Livingston Parish, and Baton Rouge flood. They didn't imagine it would be as bad as it was. When they were talking about flooding initially, they were talking about inches in your house, which is bad enough, but way better than feet. Okay. So she says, you need to get home. We need to pick this stuff up. And at this time I was very concerned. So I was agreeing with her. So I travel home. One thing I noticed traveling home was that water was getting higher and higher. So I get to my house, and I'm going to kind of lay out how my neighborhood looks. Okay. There's a highway called Highway 16 that It's also known as Vincent Road. The aspect that I drive runs from Range Avenue, and it actually crosses both sides, or it's directly in front of Range Avenue, and it runs all the way to a village called Port Vincent. And I live right off of Range Avenue, about, I don't know, a quarter of a mile. My neighborhood is a one-street subdivision. It's got houses on both sides. I think maybe there might be 50 houses if you count both sides of the road, and there's a cul-de-sac. So there's one way in, one way out, a cul-de-sac in the back. I live in that cul-de-sac in the back. There's no water on Highway 16 at this point, and I don't really notice water on the streets yet in many of the subdivisions that I passed on the way home. So I get home, and my wife is inside, and everything is, she's rocking. She's picking stuff up, and she says, you need to put all this in the attic. And I'm like, you got to be kidding. And she says, no, I'm not. You need to put all this in the attic. Now, these are like irreplaceables, right? They're pictures of our kids when they were little. They're Christmas cards that my kids drew when they were in kindergarten. They, things from her grandmother. Very important stuff, to say the least. And so I understood, but I thought it was absolutely absurd to put that stuff in an attic. So I start stacking it on the countertops in my kitchen. And she is basically like, what are you doing? And I said, I'm putting this on the countertops. Our countertops are 4 feet high. We're not going to get 4 feet of water in this house. They're estimating like inches. Do you realize if we get 4 feet of water, that would mean the whole city would be underwater? It'd be Noah's Ark. It would be Noah's Ark out there if we got 4 feet of water. I'm not putting this stuff in the attic. There's no way. Because she had a ton of stuff. And I'd have been going up and down that ladder for 3 hours putting that stuff in the attic, quite honestly. And I thought it was totally ridiculous. Boy, did I pay for that one later. And there's more to come on that. But that's what we do. We start picking stuff up. Now, I had a backup plan, right? I had at that time, I think it was a 45-foot camper, 3 slides in it. It was big. It was a big boy. And those campers, the big ones like that, they're jacked up pretty high. I mean, the jacks on those things, when you set them up, I would say they're a good 3 foot or 2.5. No, I'd say closer to 3 foot off the ground before you even get into the camper. Okay. I had a backup plan. I wasn't extremely concerned about a place to live or anything like that, because I had that camper out there and I knew, okay, if we get water in the house and we got to replace flooring or something, we'll just stay in the camper for a week. Right. I had electricity ran to that. So it was no worries, no concern about that at all. So I get home, we're picking stuff up. We finally put all of the irreplaceables on that counter, kitchen counter. And I start doing an assessment of what's going on at this point. My wife is still inside. She's picking stuff up, putting it on. She took a bunch of stuff and put it like on our bed, because our bed was probably 3 foot off the ground. So she also did that, I remember a lot of pictures on there. And I went in my front yard, and I want you to picture this. our subdivision is an older subdivision there in Denham Springs, and it's big lots. So each of these houses sits on probably 3/4 of an acre if you count the front and the back, front and backyards. So we have a pretty big front yard, and it's wide, and we have an even bigger backyard, and it's wide. And so I went in that front yard, and I was looking across the street, and my across the street neighbor's house is there. And then I'm looking beyond that into his backyard, and I see something that gives me pause and concern. And it was basically water. And I had never seen it, even in like flash flooding situations, where it was that close to his house. It was literally half his backyard underwater. And I'm like, wow, man, he's going to get some water in his house. Now, my house is built up somewhat high, I thought. And I have a very long driveway. You could probably park 6 cars front to back in my driveway lengthwise on each side. So you could fit probably 12 cars front to back in my driveway. It's relatively long. It had a long way to travel to get in my house. And I knew that. So still, even at this point, I'm not extremely concerned. A little worried, but not extremely. My neighbor next to me, a guy named Mickey, who has since passed away. He actually passed away of COVID. We miss him dearly in that subdivision. He was a great guy, but I'll never forget Mickey was out there and he had his stick ready, right? And he's going to stick his stick out there and watch that water once it kind of cross that street and see how fast that water's coming up. And I thought that was a great idea. I'm going to go get my stick. And I remember him saying that water's coming, and we're laughing about it. We're like, oh yeah, this is just what we need. And I go in my backyard to get a stick, and I see it. The water in my backyard is coming up quick. So it hit me like a ton of bricks. I'm like, wait a minute. It's coming from both sides. How is this possible? That freaked me out. Now I knew we're in trouble. I'd never seen water that close to my house in my backyard. I have a tool shed, I guess you could call it, or whatever. It's built onto my house. And it was probably 6 inches from getting in that tool shed. At that time, I had lived in that house like something like 20 years. I had never seen the water that close. It wasn't high water yet. It was only a couple of inches, but it was coming. So I went in the house and I told my wife, I said, we need to get the kids in the camper. I knew at that point I'm getting water in my house. It's coming. We need to get the kids in the camper. Okay, so we grab all our kids. My kids at the time, twin girls, 10. My son was 12. So we put them in camper, turn TV on, cut the AC on, and we go back in the house. And we start picking up quickly, right? It's coming. We're picking up fast. And as we're picking up, I want y'all to really grasp the time that it took. From the time I went in the backyard and noticed, wow, I've never seen water this high, or rather this deep into my backyard and approaching my house like this, to the time that we had the kids in the camper and we were inside picking up everything else we could, was probably 5 minutes at the most. From the time I had noticed water halfway up the backyard of my across the street neighbor to the point that I was inside picking all that stuff up was 10 minutes. Okay, so all this is going fast. So as we're picking stuff up inside, another maybe 5 minutes passes. So you're talking 15 minutes from the time I pulled up at my house until now. And something told me, go outside and check that water. And in 15 minutes time, that water had completely flooded my across the street neighbor's house from the back. And it was coming up it was probably 25% of my front yard was covered with water. Inches at this point. All the gutters were full. The street had inches of water in it. So I hammered my stick and I went to check my backyard again. I walk in the backyard and the water is in my tool shed back there. Just a little bit. Just going through the weep holes. Oh my holy God. That was my first thought. Literally, I still remember saying that to myself. Oh my holy God. Because it was still raining hard, people. It wasn't a soft rain. It would soft rain for 2 minutes and it would absolutely pour for 15. So I knew this is about to be really bad. So I go back in the house to tell my wife we have water going into the tool shed. When I go back there, or when I go back in the house, I literally shut the back door, walking from the living room into the bedroom where my wife was. And before I could even make it there, I hear, oh shit. And I knew. There's no way it's traveling from the back and flooding my house already where my wife was in the house.
Get great deals throughout the store at Safeway. This week at Safeway, get mega packs of bone-in USDA choice beef New York strip steaks for $5.97 per pound with digital coupon. Limit 2 packages. Plus, Haas avocados are 10 for $10. Member price. Also, this week at Safeway, mix or match 12 packs of 12-ounce cans or 8 packs of 12-ounce bottles of Coca-Cola, Pepsi, 7-Up, or Dr. Pepper are buy 2, get 3 free. Limit 3 free items. Member price plus CRV. Visit Safeway.com or head in store for more deals.
And I walked back there and I said, what? And she said, it's coming in the house. It's coming in the house. It's coming in the house. And she's freaking out. And she's taking towels and panicking and putting these towels where it's coming in under the shoe molding. It's just seeping in, right? It's a slow seep in, but our entire carpet in our bathroom was soaked. And I said, put down the towels. And she said, I can't put down the towels, Jim. We've got to stop this. And I said, Wendy, put down the towels. There's no stopping this. Think about that. There's no stopping this. I know you're scared, but put down the towels. We got bigger fish to fry. And I turned around and I went out the front door. And y'all, it was an inch from the door I went out of and it was coming in the back side or the front side of my house where the bedroom window was. The entire street was flooded. And I see my neighbor across the street, and he had actually a great idea. I'm like, man, I can't believe I didn't think of this. He had cinder blocks out there. He put his jacks on the cinder blocks, and he was jacking up his cars. Now, at the time, I had two vehicles. I had a F-150 that I drove, and my wife drove an Expedition EL. So this is a big SUV. She's seeing the water about to go in our house. And she says, you need to get the vehicles and move them to the road, to Highway 16, which was up high. That was the highest point in that area, pretty much. You need to get the vehicles and move them to Highway 16. I said, y'all, I don't know what I was thinking, but I said, I don't want to move the Expedition to Highway 16 because I don't want anyone breaking into it. I said, it's not going to go. It was a big vehicle. I mean, it's a big Expedition, and it was, it was high, big tires on it. And I said, it's not going to go in the freaking Expedition. Y'all, I was still hard-headed. Lesson number one, listen to your wife. Lesson number one, listen to your wife. Because if I would have listened to my wife, it would have caused a lot less issues later on. But, I mean, us guys, we can be hard-headed, right? So I looked at my stick at this point that was stuck in the yard, and it was way beyond the stick. I'm talking feet. Now, the time that transpired, y'all, between the time that I set that stick out there the first time and the time that I checked it the second time, you're talking 7 minutes tops. 7 minutes. So I took the stick again and I said, I'm going to time this. And it probably, I don't know, maybe 6 inches were in the street. And I start thinking, I wonder if I do need to start moving the vehicles. So I go back inside. And of course, now the carpet in the whole house is wet, and the wood floors are getting water puddling on them. It's coming in. It's coming in now from all directions, back and front. And I told my wife, we got to get out of here. I said, call your mother and see if they have water. Now, my mother-in-law lives across Highway 16 from where we live in a subdivision called Laplace. And, 30 seconds. I mean, literally, you leave our subdivision, you cross the street, and you're in her subdivision. And she calls her mother. Her mother says, we're high and dry over here. There ain't a speck of water nowhere. And so she tells me that, and I said, we're going to have to go to your mom's. I'm going to have to bring y'all to your mom's, and then I'll come back, and I'll continue to pick up stuff. She says, okay. And I said, let's pick up what we can now together, because, there's 2 of us. And when I think that water's getting to the point I might have trouble driving through it, I'll drive y'all out of here. And then I'll go back, get the other vehicle, drive it out. And so that's what we did. The time frame there, about another 5 minutes. I went outside to check that stick. That water had rose to a foot. A foot. So it went from no water on the street to water a foot in my house in an hour. I said, get in the truck. Get the kids in the truck. I ran in the house. Get in the truck. We got to get in the truck. My wife walked out there, and it was a look of sheer terror. My neighbor was loading his kids in a boat, and his wife and that boat was floating. And I said, get in the car, or get in the truck, my F-150. It was a little bit higher than the Expedition. So I open up the camper. I said, kids, get in the truck. Get in the truck. Don't look. Close your eyes if it scares you, but get in the truck. They got in the truck. My wife gets in the truck. I back up. The water was so heavy, y'all. I distinctly remember this, that had I let off the gas, even going in reverse, I was worried the water would suck up the muffler and kill the vehicle. So I knew enough to know, as long as I had my foot on this gas, I'm pushing that water out of that muffler. So I never took my foot off the gas. I kicked it in reverse and just kicked it in drive without taking my foot off the gas. And I'm going forward, and that water is so heavy, I had to push down on that accelerator to move it. It was only maybe a foot high at that point. The way my subdivision is laid out, it slopes. So when you turn into my subdivision, there's a good slope there. It slopes down. I don't know how many degrees, but my neighbors in the front of my subdivision, they had no water in their houses at that time. Us in the back part of the subdivision, we were all flooded. They had no water at that time, but they're all outside. It's all in their yards. It's coming. And they're all outside and just kind of staring at it. And I'll never forget this. As I'm driving, getting my 10-year-old twins, my 12-year-old son, and my wife out, a neighbor down the road. And look, I want to preface this with, we were all stressed out, right? We're all stressed out. And I also want to mention one thing I do want to back up and mention is during all this process of picking everything up, one of the things I knew to grab was my guns. I took a couple of them, I put them in my attic, and I took two of them, a 22 that I had because it was small, it was easy to carry, and a 9mm that I had that was holstered. Put them on. Not because I was looking to be the Wild Wild West, but, you know, I'm smart enough to know that people loot after things like this, and I didn't want them getting a hold of my guns. And I knew that water would absolutely ruin my guns. So I grabbed what I could. I did put those other two in the attic. Just not because I thought the water was going to get high enough to, you know, I would have laid them on my countertops in my kitchen, but they're guns. I didn't want them just being laid out. So I did put those in the attic. So as we're going down the road, my neighbor down the street is like yelling at me, like literally, like cussing at me. And y'all, it pissed me off. And to tell you what he was cussing at me about was the wake that I was making as I was going down the road, as if I was like sightseeing, as if I'm like, oh, I want to go see how much it flooded, and I'm driving down the road just to check out other people's houses. No, dude, I'm getting my family out of here. You understand? You understand? What do you want me to do? Hover over the water? So he's acting like a fool out there. And this was, y'all, I lost my head. I really did. I saw him doing that, and I saw his little animated stuff. And his house had not flooded yet. He was more towards the front of the subdivision. And I freaking threw that truck in park, and I jumped out of that car, and I said, you got some kind of problem? He said, you're making a wake, and you're going to get the water in my house. And I said, let me tell you something, fool. That water's coming in your house. It just ain't made it there yet. And I looked at him and I said, I'm getting my family out of here. Are you crazy? And I jumped back in that car and I kept going. And I thought, the nerve of that guy. What does he think I'm going to do? Walk my 10-year-olds through a foot of water? Leave my trucks just sitting there? I had no choice. So I cross that road, right? I go to my mother-in-law's house and I drop off my wife, my kids, and I literally drop them off. And there's no water in that subdivision right now, none. And I say, I'm going back. I'm going to try to pick other stuff up and get that handled. She says, okay. So I turn around. Now this is another, from the time I left my house, drove out of the subdivision, dropped them off at my mother-in-law's house, got back in the truck and turned around and headed back to my house. You're talking 5 minutes. I mean, this is all little 5-minute increments. I jumped out, I jumped back in my truck, headed down the road, crossed Highway 16 and stopped. The whole subdivision was flooded. The whole subdivision was flooded. Now, this whole time, y'all, it's still raining, pouring. I couldn't get my truck back down the road, much less get it back out if I even managed to get it down the road. Now, every neighbor has water in their house, all the way up to the front of the whole subdivision is full of water. Maybe 8 inches in the front of the subdivision, a little over a foot, maybe a foot and a half in the back, and that's just an estimation. So I park my truck. So I go back to my mother-in-law's house. I park the truck. I walk back out of the subdivision, walk across Highway 16 into my subdivision, and I walk to my house. By the time I made it back there, I was almost swimming. It was that bad. I get in my house, and I'm throwing computers up on counters. I'm doing everything I can, and within about 10 minutes of that, I realize I better get out of here. Now, I had a bag, a book sack. So I'd taken the guns and I had stuck them in the book sack because I knew I could hold the book sack over my head and the guns wouldn't get wet. And, the little bit of stuff that I had grabbed, which was really nothing. I did everything I could in the 10 minutes of time I had before I knew it's getting a little bit too deep. I need to get out of here. By the time I walked back out of that house, there were 3 or 4 neighbors that had already, I remember my neighbor right across the street had his family in a boat, and he's kind of towing them out. He had a string on the boat, and he's towing them out. Several other neighbors doing the same thing. And at this point, it's almost waist deep. And I'm going to tell y'all what I noticed more than anything else. I will never forget this. I'm walking through that water. And if you experience this and you're from Denham Springs or Livingston Parish and you flooded, you can relate to this. The spiders. Spiders float. Who knew? And there's thousands of them in grass. Who knew? I never knew that. Y'all, I'm telling you, when I walked in that water, now it's about waist deep, and I'm walking down that subdivision, trying to get back to Highway 16 to go to my mother-in-law's house. These spiders were everywhere. These weren't biting spiders. They weren't like black widows. I don't know what you call them, grass spiders or what, the brown ones. But there were millions of these things, and they were just floating on the surface. You had to push the spiders out of the way to keep walking. And they're alive. They're like swimming like people. It's crazy. But that stuck out to me. I'm like, oh my God, look at all the spiders. They're everywhere. And you're seeing it, y'all. You're seeing older folks wading through this water. Everybody's just trying to get the heck out, and nobody had nothing. I had a little book sack, and everybody else kind of had the same thing, and we're trucking it to Highway 16 because there's nothing else we can do. Fortunately, one of my neighbor right next door to me, Mr. Mickey, and his wife, they got out, and they were smart enough to evacuate in the middle of all this. So they had gotten out of the city before all this happened. Now, I want to put this in a perspective. This is just my subdivision. You're talking a whole city full of subdivisions that was flooding. So what I just described to you was probably the same no matter what subdivision you were in the city. Everybody probably had pretty much the same experience there. So I get out, I cross Highway 16, and I make it to my mother-in-law's house. Still no water. No water. They're high and dry over there. And at this time, I want to say it was maybe 12 o'clock in the afternoon, something like that. And I said, y'all, we're flooding bad. And they're like, how bad is it? And I said, well, it's waist deep. It's waist deep. At our house, in the back of that subdivision, the front of the subdivision, it was probably halfway up your calves at that point. So maybe a foot and a half. And so at this point, we're thinking, thank God we have somewhere high and dry to go. Little did we know what was coming. Same way I ended the first episode, I'm going to end the second. Little did we know what was coming. Still raining. At this time, it's about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, 12:30, something like that. The river was over 43 feet. The record was 41.5 feet. That was in 1983. Still going up. Still raining. All of those sorts of things. So we're at my mother-in-law's house, and we're just all kind of huddled and waiting. Now, something to mention, and this will come into play in the next episode. My father-in-law is bedridden, or was bedridden. He's since passed away. We miss him dearly. But at the time of the flood, he was bedridden. He had Alzheimer's and Lewy body dementia. So he was totally immobile. So when we get to my mother-in-law's, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, how am I going to get him out of here? If I got to get him out of here, how am I going to get him out of here? Now, all of this happened so fast, y'all. There wasn't no, well, we can call an ambulance real quick and get him out of here. Everything's flooding. Everything. The entire city, the city is cut off at this point. Yes, there's subdivisions like my mother-in-law's that had not flooded yet. But what we didn't know, what none of us knew at this point at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, was Range Avenue in Denham Springs was completely underwater. So much so to the point that the cars were submerged where you couldn't even see the top of them. And throughout this broadcast, I'll be popping up pictures of things I have and things I can find to show you. Some pretty cool pictures that I do have, or some that are on loan to me from Mayor Gerard Landry for specific use in this podcast. And it's going to be some pictures that were given to them from a local photographer that show some of this devastation. So if you're from another part of the country and you're not familiar with this flood, you'll be able to kind of follow along and see what we all saw. But Range Avenue, the main highway through Denham Springs, completely submerged. Cars completely submerged. businesses completely submerged. And this was the word I was getting through the sporadic texts that would pop up and Facebook when I could pull it up because the cell service was getting real spotty. I was seeing the pictures. And remember, I have a store. Right there on Florida Boulevard in Denham Springs that is relatively close to the Amite River. And I knew it's got to be flooded. And there's no way I'm getting to it right now. So I'm going to leave it right there. Thank you for listening.
Judy was boring.
Hello.
Then Judy discovered ChumbaCasino.com.
It's my little escape.
Now Judy's the life of the party.
Oh, baby, mama's bringing home the bacon.
Whoa, take it easy, Judy. The Chumba life is for everybody. So go to ChumbaCasino.com and play over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Hey guys, it is Ryan. I'm not sure if you know this about me, but I'm a bit of a fun fanatic when I can. I like to work, but I like fun too. It's a thing. And now the truth is out there. I can tell you about my favorite place to have fun. Chumba Casino. They have hundreds of social casino style games to choose from with new games released each week. You can play for free anytime, anywhere. And each day brings a new chance to collect daily bonuses. So join me in the fun. Sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18 plus.